Hopefully YouTube will be nice and let me edit that out. But anyways, welcome everybody. My name is Ben, and for all of you out there in Book Club 106 land that couldn't make it to our conversation tonight, hopefully we'll give you some good conversation about Alone Together, specifically chapters 1 and 2, and maybe the intro and whatever else we happen to read. So I'm your host, I'm the moderator, and I am coming to you from St. Joseph, Michigan, tiny little place right here on the edge of Lake Michigan. And what I do for a living is kind of this stuff, geeky, techie, education stuff. That's what I do. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to you gentlemen to introduce yourselves.
Go ahead, Alan.
Coin flip. Thanks, Ben. Alan Levine here from Strawberry, Arizona. So let me see. I don't know if Arizona's like this. Somewhere above that hair in my knuckle, which doesn't help at all. But it's a small little town about 100 and some miles away from Phoenix. And I, too, do ed techie stuff right now, actually kind of unaffiliated with anybody, sort of doing my own thing. Actually, I'm doing a sabbatical, I say. Someday I'll have to find a responsible job. But I've been in ed tech for about 20 years, mostly higher ed.
Cool.
Okay, and I'm Ron Houtman from Kent Intermediate School District in Grand Rapids, Michigan, so north of Bend just a little bit. And if I was in Arizona, it's easier to just do Colorado. I've been a teacher for, I think this is my 11th year or so, 11 or 12. It's hard to keep track of that during the summertime. And taught high school students in a career and tech ed center, and now over into my job as ed tech consultant. And just kind of do the same thing that Ben does, but at a district, I guess, large intermediate school district level, and no, we're not a middle school.
So it's an intermediate district, not an intermediate school.
Correct.
School, right. Cool, excellent. And this is sort of like a second life for you, correct, Ron? Education?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think I'm on my 5th career now. So prior to this, I was, I could count back quite a ways, and go back to high school, to Air Force, to law enforcement, to information technology, to teaching. So it's a weird, strange journey.
That's all right. That's what life's all about. Cool. All right. So basically, for those of you that may be watching this after the fact, I know that there's at least a few of you because unfortunately one person was having some technical difficulties, couldn't get in, and I just saw a tweet from Shelly that said she actually didn't get the book yet. That's okay, and I'm calling you out, and I'm sorry, but that's how it goes. If it's any consolation, I didn't actually finish all of Chapter 2, so there you go. There's my mea culpa. But anyways, we're going to do the first half of the show pretty simply like we usually do. So those of you that are watching this after the fact, I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the description to the Google Moderator questions, and we're just going to talk about the most popular ones. And the most popular question, Ron, was yours. If you'd like, I can set it up for you, or if you'd like, you're more than welcome to set it up.
You go ahead, sir. You're the moderator.
Okay. All right, here we go.
That's your position.
That's my elected position. Actually, it wasn't. There was no election. It was a coup. In the introduction, Ron says the author states, "Our networked life allows us to hide from each other, even as we are tethered to each other. We'd rather talk than, we'd rather text than talk. We'd rather be doing one of these things than actually doing kind of what we're doing right now. Do you find that to be true in your life, in the life of others you encounter?" And there were some really good conversations. Bill Campbell weighed in. He said it wasn't true for his life. Maybe it's because he's in his early 40s, so texting isn't a much a part of his life as it was for some of his younger colleagues even and students. John Beals from Ann Arbor weighed in. He said it's funny because his wife remarked that she's more of a talker than a texter, She actually will call people on the phone rather than text, much to the chagrin of her coworkers. And then I chimed in, and Anna and Carol and all sorts of other wonderful people chimed in. But I'll just take it right back to you, Ron. What interested you about that, and which one do you find to be more true in your life?
Well, for me, I think it's almost when she made that comment in the introduction part that says that we're kind of hiding from each other. I guess I don't see it as that at all. I see that the technology that we have allows us to communicate differently with each other instead of just hiding from each other. There's some awkward. I guess I'll just keep using the word different. There's some awkward moments, and I'll give you an example of this. Is if one of my coworkers, for example, posts something on Facebook, and I'll see them the next day, you almost feel like you don't have to talk about it because you've already said something about it on Facebook to them. So sometimes it's just it's a different conversation that you're having. But then again, you now have a window into somebody else's life that you otherwise wouldn't. So they're sharing pictures of their kids. I wouldn't normally see those things if we didn't have a Facebook or a Twitter or some social presence. So to me, the technology is not necessarily dividing us, that we'd rather text than talk. To me, it seems like it opens up new conversations and new avenues for conversations with those people that we know. So those are the physical people that I meet every day. There's the other group too, just like Alan. Alan's in Arizona. I don't have chance to go see him on a daily basis because it's expensive and time consuming.
But it would be worth it.
Yeah, it would be.
It's beautiful here too.
Yeah, but the technology to me, it opens up great avenues. What we're on right now with the Google Hangout. This is not texting. This is a conversation. It's just our disembodied heads in different places. But to me, this really opens up things. So I think she's made kind of a presupposition here that the technology is isolating. I don't see it that way at all.
Well,
I'm sorry. I remember the context. She was talking about one of her case studies where she knocked on the door and the person who answered texted to the person in the other room rather than knocking on the door and saying somebody's here, as if one is superior to the other.
Yeah.
And I've seen people in restaurants, texting to each other, and there's couples who will be in the same house and text to each other, but like you're right, it's different. And she starts almost the language of that question itself is already laden with kind of that negative attitude.
Yeah.
I mean, hiding has connotations to it.
Right.
Well, and it was really funny because in that example, when she asked the person who answered the door, why don't you just go knock on her door? It's just at the top of the stairs. And she said, oh no, that would be too intrusive.
Yeah.
And see now, and that word right there, that's very subjective, right? Because to me, I actually look at a text as being more intrusive because a text is almost, and I put this answer in the Google moderator. The text to me is something that's much more immediate, much more urgent. Like, you know what? Hey, I'm texting you because I have a strong hunch that your phone is on you. And whether or not you're looking at it, you're gonna look at it when it rings. At least that's what I do. When my phone buzzes, oop, what's going on? Oh, it's a text. To me, that's much more, I guess, invasive or intrusive rather, because it's like me right there on your shoulder, whispering in your ear, like, hey, I need something, rather than the polite, knock. But I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. So maybe it is, and she even mentions it. Maybe it is just a generational thing, or just based on her experiences.
It's kind of interesting when you say that about how we kind of add some sort of urgency to a text message. I'm from that age that says if you want to get me and it's quote unquote an emergency, then that's a voice call. If you want me to get back to you sometime, then that's an email. And maybe somewhere in the middle is this text message. And I know with my students, I always kind of wondered, it's like, what are you guys texting to each other all the time? And I've actually asked them the question, and they tell me things like, well, nothing. Well, I said, seriously, go through do you mind? Just tell me what you're texting. And they go something like this with kids, like, what are you doing? Nothing. Where are you at? Over here. What are you doing? Nothing. I mean, they're really just checking in with each other more than anything else.
We used to do that. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I asked you first.
Yeah, this is 21st century version of that.
But Ben, with the example you gave, I almost go the other way because let's say I'm in the middle of something, and this used to happen when I worked in the office. I'm in the middle of like programming something, and I'm locked into it. Someone knocks on my door, and I have to stop what I'm doing, and I have to give them attention. I should, and a lot of times I would lose my train of thought. So my phone, I don't have the sound on. It flashes, so it does disturb me. But I can delay somewhat my response, so I'm able to be a little bit more flexible. If it's important, I may jump out, but I can finish what I'm doing. To me, I see it as almost less intrusive. It allows me to juggle what I'm doing at the very time. I mean, that's one example. I mean, yeah, it does catch my attention, but sometimes I don't see the text flashing, and I don't notice till later.
No, that's a good point. I don't always catch it either. And actually, Carol, who was attempting to get in here tonight, she did get a message in on that, and she said it depends, but she said she tends to use texting for just the short messages or the quick check-ins, the things that maybe aren't necessarily that vital, like you're saying right there, Alan. And I have a similar attitude as well. Like if I truly really need to get someone's attention or talk with them, I will make a point of going and visiting and knocking on their door and getting in there.
But it's really more efficient if all I need is one little bit of information for you.
Yep.
If I call you, I'm not just going to say, Ben, what's 7 times 6? We're going to talk or say how you doing, how the kids, and not that I don't mind that, but there's sometimes when you just need to do a simple exchange of information. So it's kind of like, I mean, Ron was alluding to this. It's like choosing, those channels. Sometimes email, sometimes the phone call.
Right. Well, yeah, and that's a good point. And I find that I don't text people as often as I might normally would, unless I have developed a relationship with them, a face-to-face relationship, and so I do have this sort of understanding with them of hey, we don't have to go through the rigmarole of how's the wife, how's the kids, and the pets and everything, and
because we know that from Facebook and Twitter,
because we know from Facebook and Twitter, you're right.
I think the next problem, the problem that I know I'm having, I know some of my colleagues too, and probably you guys, is all the different ways that messages get to you now. So I know at work, I've got 1,000 things running. So there's Twitter, I've got Skype, I've got a thing from Microsoft called Lync, which we use inside of our organization, LYNC, which is now Microsoft and Skype because they own each other somehow. They're going to roll those things together. I've got text messages, etc. I think that's going to be the hardest thing for a lot of us to do, is to try to figure out how to balance all these incoming messages and try to get them in one place. That's one of the things that we're seeing, besides just cloud sprawl, where you have no idea what your files are anymore. They're in Dropbox or cloud this or whatever. Now you're going to be into message sprawl. You're never going to know, you're not going to have one unified location where all this stuff comes into. And then you might be held accountable for dropping the ball here and there because the protocols are kind of weird. Organizations really haven't, I don't think, addressed that so much of how we are expected to communicate, and especially with external stakeholders even.
Ooh. But don't you? I mean, you come to probably some norms. I mean, you're using this link. I wouldn't necessarily use this Microsoft Link thing on my own. Maybe it's great, but obviously it becomes part of the norm. But yeah, I get what you're saying. So yeah, typically when I'm done with a Skype call, I usually close down Skype because I don't want to be seen online. That just shuts off. It's like hanging up the phone for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a problem knowing, am I going to spend all day paying attention to these channels?
You know what I want back? Just one thing. I want the dial tone back and the busy tone back.
Well, you can download them.
Yeah. Busy signal, just like big unified busy signal for everybody.
Cool. Well, we've kind of played that one out. There was a comment in there that Anna from Urbana, Illinois, sort of echoed a lot of the things we've already said. She did add one thing though that she did add is that when her first text, when she's trying to explain something longer, then sometimes text can be a little bit confusing.
Yeah.
Which totally makes sense. And I think we see that even beyond the text. I wish she had mentioned Twitter more in the first couple chapters. Even with Twitter, everyone loves Twitter and it's fantastic and it's a great way to connect, and it is. But with that 140 character limit, sometimes I know I find myself getting into situations that I might not have been had I been face to face and had the ability to elaborate a little bit on what I wanted to say, rather than that in the moment tweet goes off and someone has to respond to what I was able to.
I did one of those last night. I apologize for it this morning to another person, because the tone isn't there, that the context is not completely there, and you don't have enough room sometimes. So, and I told them, I said, my message came off a little bit snarky, and I apologize for that. And that's in reading back. It didn't mean to be that way. But again, I think that's another trap of the texting business too, is that there's no context. Like all of us just talking right now, I could say, hey Ben, those are nice glasses, or I could say, I could say lots of different ways and have different meanings, and I could send you that same text and you'd be like, what does this mean?
Which window are you
yeah, right
are you stalking me from?
Right.
Yeah, no, yeah. It's there's so much more when you have the face-to-face, even this, as if it's a face-to-face conversation. There's so much more we can get out of just the body language and the unspoken parts of the communication.
And knowing, knowing that it's the wrong mode and saying, hey, let's take this out. But trying to help people with technical problems through Twitter is, in a way, if it's a quick answer, you can send them a link. But when you're trying to get someone to describe, I was trying to help Dean Sharesky do something, and it doesn't work. Well, I don't know what that means. So and that, to spell out the context, you either go back and forth or you say, give me a Skype call or something. But it can be hard to know how to ask a question as well.
Sure. Well, I had, let me see, I'm counting here. I have 9 messages back and forth this morning about Blackboard and Java with somebody, trying to help them make it work. Again, that would have been so much easier if I just said, call me.
9's pretty short for Blackboard and Java.
yeah. You're not kidding.
Cool. All right. Well, moving right along. The second most voted question happened to be a question that I got in just today, actually. And I noticed I got this vibe as I was reading all of these. She's talking about robotic companionates. Does that sound appropriate? That's how I was reading that word, companionate.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
But I couldn't help thinking, as she was talking about all these different conversations, the girl who tracked her down to the conference and said, oh my gosh, how close are we to actually robotic companions, because I'm ready to dump my boyfriend right now, for one. And then and some people, I thought it was rather interesting. I didn't know how everyone would react to the rather lengthy section about robotics and sex and stuff like that. It's like, wow, I'm curious, where she went to do all of this research, and what these people at MIT are talking about. But what I thought was interesting is that Freud and Maslow and all of these other cognitive and psychoanalysts, cognitive theorists, popped into my head. And basically, we have it pretty well established that we as human beings are very egotistical. We're driven by our ids. We're very self-serving. And we have a whole lot of really basic, fundamental needs that need to be met. In many cases, they could be selfish. But I couldn't help but ask that question of myself in these opening chapters. Is she suggesting that these robotic companionates and all the and virtual realities, are they just means to feed and bolster our own selfishness? And a couple people followed up. Anna followed up. She said she does seem to suggest that, Turkle even mentioned that children who don't want to take the time to teach English to a Furby after its batteries have been taken out, because she was talking about how the children will form this relationship and teach the Furby English, and but then batteries got taken out, they died, Furby forgets everything. We'll get new batteries in. Do you want to teach them English all over again? No, no, I don't need to. I've already had that need met. And then Carol, which is kind of scary, right? Because that's teachers. We have to do that every single year. We can't just say, oh no, we got new kids without batteries. With new batteries, forget it. But the Carol from Michigan, she chimed in too, saying children are generally quite unselfish. They may cling to their toys fervently, but they tend to be hyper-aware and identify strongly with physical and emotional discomfort in others. They will nurture traditional companionate toys, dolls, repeatedly replaying stages of development over and over, really practicing nurturing. With the robots, they don't get a do-over. I wonder if they just aren't emotionally and cognitively ready for that. And I thought, wow, man, first of all, Carol, I'm so sorry you weren't here for this conversation.
Yeah.
Man, that's just blowing my mind right now, trying to wrap my head around it. But it's some good points. And my daughter and my son were just doing that today with some of their toys, their little trains and their little Lego creations of people and everything. They have whole conversations and everything. But the electronic toys that we have that they respond to, yeah, they'll play through them and they'll play through the whole, the role play. We've got one of those little virtual pet things. We've got one of the Zuzu pets. Mm-hmm. And my daughter, she played with it for a while and found out all the little algorithms of all the buttons, like to push the button on its back, the buttons on its nose, and to get it to go in every direction and everything. And then she was like, I'm done. No, I'm done. And then she goes right back to her American Girl doll.
So does she, I mean, Turkle talks a lot about, the kids being very aware that some things are toy, like, the dolls obviously don't talk back, but this kind of in-between space where they know it's not real or alive, but it's like alive enough,
right,
to kind of sustain that. So, and it sounds like your daughter is kind of not as close to that line of whatever that attachment is that Turkle's described. I was really fascinated by that, by some of the stuff she wrote about.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting too, is the part just about like the Furby, where she says that the kids see it like it's in pain, and I've seen a lot of kids interact with Furbies and other things. I've never seen that. So, and I've got enough nieces and nephews that have had lots of these sort of toys, and it's just play. It's the normal play that they do. I've never seen them really get into this part of thinking that the animal, whenever the batteries die, is in pain for some reason. She kind of talked about that a little bit.
So the kids, sorry, Ron, they put it aside like any other toy. And
I think so. Yeah, I think that that was just something that in her, she was talking. Again, she's kind of broad here, in talking that everybody does all of this stuff, and I just don't see that. I see. Maybe in her unique situation, she saw one or two kids that did this, but in my experience, I haven't seen that as a real big thing. I think kids are they're very smart. They know the difference between reality and not reality.
Right. Well, and that's a good point, and I would say the same thing. It could just be her sample size. Even though she did list, several schools that she had talked with and everything, but there's only so many kids that she can interact.
Yeah.
And then of course you've got us that are, well, all of us right here are educators. I know, Alan, you're working more with adults, but Ron and I are working with adults and kids on almost a daily basis. So we get a much larger sample size. But I thought what was really interesting was when she's talking more about the adults, and in particular when the interviewer from Scientific American was calling her, and actually got to the point where it was like sort of grilling her and calling her out, like, you don't believe in human robotic love and marriage, and then calling her out on that and saying, well, aren't you in support of gay marriage and everything? And she's totally taken aback and everything, and I was kind of with her on that point. It's like, humans and humans and a robot, that's different.
Mhm.
That's different. And I was right there with her when she was talking about, when we open up, when we're intimate with other people, and I don't mean intimate necessarily in a sexual manner or anything like that, but just intimate to where I can share my vulnerabilities, and other people hopefully share their vulnerabilities with me, very much akin to what a teacher would do with students, trying to really get to understand the students, and hopefully the students understand the teacher, so that you can form a relationship and better understand one another. That's totally different than interacting with a robot. And many of the people that gave her, in her case studies in the first couple chapters, were talking about, I just want the robot because I know what I'm going to get. And I can talk to the robot, and I can yell at the robot, and then I can be fine. And to me, that really just smacked of like, that sounds really selfish. You know? Like, I want what I want. I don't want to take the time to have to interact with other people and develop deeper relationships that, yes, might stink and might be awful and horrible, but at the same time, they're going to offer so much more in the long run than having this relationship with an inanimate object that has been programmed to give me just what I want.
I see a lot of, just again thinking of the Furby piece and part of the book, the ethical landscape part. It's, to me, it's just the standard sort of play that all kids do. It could be a robotic sort of doll. It could be their American doll or their real baby doll or whatever it might be. It's still that sort of play that every kids do, and it's just part of their continuum of growth. Kids go through all these different stages of how they interact with their world and their toys. It goes from trying to emulate what, like when you get your first baby doll, trying to emulate what your mom does, to down the road you decide that these are not, I'm too old for these.
Sure.
It's kind of, to me, the whole idea of the robot versus the non-robotic toys and reading into these things is kind of a distinction without a difference. It's just a continuum of play that kids go through in their lifespan. That's what I kind of saw in this. So I think it's interesting to really read into that, but I don't know if we need to read into it that far.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
Maybe I wasn't too much into it.
I mean, I'm torn, because she does these things. She makes these like generalized statements, and I know she's drawing from a lot of experience, and she does a lot of research. So,
Yeah.
and obviously anybody doing this where she is no slouch. But out of it, it's just these sentences. I keep writing Turkleism in my book. When they sound like almost not an opinion, but it just feels like a gross generalization, and I just want to like think about all the exceptions to it. But
Mm-hmm.
I want to understand too, how she got to some of those points. So, talking about the difference between the two kids that she interviewed, 25 years apart,
Right.
and how the more recent kid she talked to is kind of okay with this robot experience, almost because she concludes that it's somewhat safer than dealing with human to human relationship, and I can see a concern there in terms of how kids learn to socialize, but obviously this is not the only socialization activity that kids are getting these days. I mean, that's why they are in school. They're
Right.
having tons of socialization with other kids and adults. So I'm trying to weigh whether it's as generalized as she's thinking, or it's just maybe just kids are getting a broader range of experiences with some of these robotic things than what we did.
Yeah. And the other part that kind of comes up with this whole idea of the robots need before this in the first chapter, just about being connected all the time. I ask my college students this from time to time also. I just ask them, how about solitude? What about that? Do you even have time anymore to engage in introspection? And a lot of my folks say, what, gosh, I'm connected 24/7, 365. And I in the points, she talks about that through, again, the first couple chapters. This is part of that too, is when do we disconnect from all of these stimuli all the time and just have time just to sit? My wife is doing jury duty right now, and I asked her the question kind of related today. I said, what's going to happen? And she told me like the makeup currently of the jury, the ages and stuff. And I said, they're basically of my age. And I said, what's it going to be like when you've got a jury of kids that have grown up their whole life being completely 24/7 connected? They have to go in a jury pool, sit there, and not be able to use their phone to check their status every 3 seconds. All these kids are going to get thrown in jail for contempt of court, And that's something I think we need to think about too, is, with our own kids, and is to teach that you don't always have to be connected to all of these different things like this, that you should figure out some way to just sit and think every once in a while.
Well, and it's easy to go out in public and see people like totally, phone faced.
Yeah.
But you don't follow. I mean, do you follow that person around for 18 hours? I mean, you base that judgment upon these isolated.
Right. Yeah.
And I had the same things. I tend to notice a lot of times when you see moms with little kids, and the moms are on the phone, and the kids are kind of wanting attention, and you kind of feel like, hey man, put the phone down. But how do we know what the sum total of their experience, are with their kids?
Right.
It's easy to jump to some of those conclusions, and I guess the things we can do are make sure that when we're out, that we too are not alone together as much, and I guess at a micro level, trying to increase some amount of human sociability as we go about our daily business.
You mean like not answering the text while you're having a face-to-face conversation with somebody?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or not freaking out when the other person does that,
Yeah. I just walk away. Yeah.
Okay, so to sort of tie this portion of the conversation up, the last question that I had here that I wanted to pull was from Jonathan Beals, who has been in some of the book club discussions previously. He wasn't able to join us tonight. He said much of the first 2 chapters is devoted to what feels like a suspension of disbelief. We all know that we might be interacting with a robot or with a virtual reality, or one of those chat bots, like one of those, something pops up on a website and oh, let me help you select this or something, and that's okay. And the need for something that is even a minimal approximation of life or a real live person. And so he's saying, do you think we are supplementing or replacing real life interactions in general? And my response was that I think I'd say the majority of us are supplementing our real lives. And it sounds like from our conversation right now, it sounds like I would assume you guys would probably agree and probably say yes. The majority of us were using some of these virtual realities or some of these worlds to just supplement what's happening in our real life, because we recognize that there's a lot more power in the real life face-to-face connections than there is in these sort of virtualized ones. Just trying to fill those voids and those needs, those nooks and crannies that we can't meet in our regular circle of friends and family that we see every day. That's what I felt, and that's how I've always tried to use technology in an educational setting. Just speaking from my own experience, never to be like a replacement. Like, here you go, here's your math website with your virtual teaching tutor. You don't need me for math anymore. They can go ahead and the algorithm will just decide what you need to learn next.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys would agree or not.
I guess when I think about the whole idea of suspension of disbelief or willingness, or willing suspension of disbelief, I just think of entertainment. I mean, that's the first thing I think of, is that we all just, it's part of our lives, entertainment. I mean, there's video games. I mean, this goes back to black and white movies, for heaven's sake. It is what it is. We love stories. We love to engage in those things and listen to those things and just take our brains to other places that we might not normally go. But those are just ways of, I guess, the entertainment side of us, or the enjoyment of entertainment. Same thing with any of these robot things. I see it as you mature in age. If you don't have the ability to understand the difference between a real thing and a non-real thing, then you got some other issues to deal with. Uh, so I don't see a problem with suspending my disbelief. I think to me it's just some way of entertaining myself.
Sure.
And I started. I mean, that example she gave of being in the Museum of Natural History, and like, is it better to have a live animal trapped in a box so you can have a near proximal experience with a live animal than having something animated or maybe a video or something like that? And I didn't know where to go with that one. You know, I'm firmly on both sides. Like, you know, our natural assumption, it's better to be closer to a live animal, but it's not great for the live animal, you know?
No, that's a good point. I even highlighted that passage when her daughter was concerned for the imprisoned turtle and unmoved by its authenticity. And I actually highlighted that and said, no, wait. There's nothing authentic about capturing an animal and putting it. She even said it was in a cage.
Yeah.
In an aquarium. There's nothing authentic about that. If you want authenticity, go fly down to the Galapagos and see the turtles in their natural habitat, right?
Or it's like going to Disney, right?
Exactly, right there. We know that Disney's Animal Kingdom and all these other places, they're completely inauthentic, right? But we're to the point now where we can't even recognize inauthentic experiences because they've just been a part of us. Zoos are not authentic at all. And every single zoo I've gone to, I've seen animals doing that crazy, totally stressed out, wigged out pacing thing back and forth. And it's like, yeah, it would be better to see a robot lion yelling and roaring and stuff like that than seeing this animal that is just completely mentally gone.
Yeah. On the replacement thing, I'm assuming, I mean, it's probably a mixture. I mean, there are things people are probably giving up. So, you know, I hardly watch any television, and that's all I did as a kid. So, you know, that's where, you know, if I was a kid now, you know, I would probably, you know, not be watching television as much as playing video games or whatnot. But, you know, as a family, and this is just my family, I mean, we didn't sit around the dinner table having conversation. We had a TV in the corner, and we ate and watched TV together.
Yep.
And we were together, but it wasn't like this rich, you know, experience of all, you know, having this rich exchange of ideas and debate. No, we were watching All in the Family or MASH in the corner of the room and not really interacting all that much.
It's like, is that like when you go to the restaurant now and you see two people sitting at the table both checking their statuses or Facebook?
Yeah.
Foursquare or taking pictures of their food and put it on Instagram, you know, it's that same sort of thing.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. It's even worse. No, it's even worse now.
But you see, I mean, then you see
different things. At least Alan, when his family was sitting around, everybody was listening to Hawkeye, and you know, what stupid thing is Radar going to say next, right?
Yeah.
But you see those couples having dinner who are just staring at each other, not having a conversation without any devices. Yeah. Or you know, as a kid, when I was bored, if I couldn't have anything to text, I daydreamed. You know, you were up there yammering at me, lecturing, and I was
somewhere else.
Exactly.
Well, I guess does that bring it back to the point then, like Turkle says, that the technology has divided us. And again, it's kind of situational. It's the restaurant where two people are just sitting there checking their phones, looking at the reviews of the restaurant they're sitting in right now, and not having a conversation. Yeah, maybe. But on the other hand, it might spark other conversation. Be like, hey, look at this thing on Urban Spoon that says that I should try the brisket. You know, never even thought of that. So,
yeah.
Never
I mean, my experience with the food apps, or it opens up potential I would have never known about. You know, and you know, and like we said, this possibility here, you know. If we were completely unturkled, I wouldn't have this opportunity.
No, and that's a great point, because there are some conversations, maybe they're not happening at that level of intimacy that Sherry Turkle thinks we all should have all the time, but they're asynchronous conversations. That's what Yelp and Urban Spoon, that's what they are, and they're open to the world.
We should just be walking on the beach, talking to each other, quoting Milton, and
We are. We're just doing it several months apart, and and I just happen to be, user Milton for life,
And there's cats in mine.
That's right. Cool. All right. Well, I tell you what, that's pretty much the questions that the top vote getting questions. I mean, there's a few questions. Brad had some questions in here, some points to throw out, but I wanted to open it up to you guys. Is there something that Alan or Ron, you guys can flip a coin again, that kind of spoke to you? It doesn't, not necessarily a question, but something that was curious, something that made you an aha, that resonated with you, or maybe something that created a pretty strong feeling of dissonance, perhaps.
The part in chapter 2 about the ethical landscape, again, just kind of interests me. Is about thinking about computers, robots, the ethics of all this stuff. Again, I'm trying to get my head wrapped around that when I think about movies like iRobot, for example, and think about things like Kurzweil keeps talking about the singularity that we might end up having.
Right.
Where our brains can be uploaded, downloaded. I can learn about flying helicopters by putting a cable in the back of my head and downloading it. I know jujitsu now. Is this, where are we and where are we going to be with the whole idea of ethics when we start to get into these human-computer relationships that we have? Are we going to know a lot more than the people that don't have access to those things? How is this going to look? I think this is way beyond our lifespan on this planet, frankly. I think it's going to be after we're gone, but I see that kind of as something that might happen. I think the science fiction sort of gives us a little bit of a glance into that. And I even think about movies, because all of these science fiction movies usually have some root in reality, as movies like Gattaca, for example, where now you are, I don't know if you've seen that before with Gattaca, you are, DNA engineered kind of, or genetically engineered. And if you're imperfect, you don't get the jobs. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff when you start thinking this whole idea of robots, ethics, communication, just for the future for us to just keep in mind about how we're going to be treating each other, I guess, and outcasting those that don't have the means to be able to access some of this stuff.
Yeah, and how quickly and callously we could do that, as she's already pointed out through several of her case studies, that it's very easy for people to make attachments to things, and it's almost easier to disregard actual living human beings.
Right.
Oh, there's one thing I don't. Oh, you're nothing.
Yeah.
It was interesting that you were talking about that, the ethical landscape, Ron, because as I was reading some of that, I was thinking about the, back in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and as the therapists, the psychoanalysts, and the computer science people started getting together, and they said, "Hey, this is our thoughts of how the human brain works," and the computer scientists are going, "Yeah, we can do that. We can make it happen." And maybe current thought is, maybe this sentience, this conscience, just arises from all of these very simple mechanisms that happen in our brain, and we can totally make that happen. And it really made me think, a lot of these people really aren't thinking about the ethics of this.
Yeah.
They're just so caught up with just yes, this will be amazing. And I'm glad you mentioned Kurzweil, because he's another guy that I think, brilliant man, probably not going to happen in his lifetime, if it happens at all. But more importantly, would people really want to do that?
Yeah.
Oh, they're going to freeze him and thaw him later.
Along with Walt Disney.
And Elvis.
I don't know if I have any comments. I was more interested in the chapters. When I read it was going to be about the robots, and honestly, I haven't been around kids in so long, so I don't have the exposure to the toys that kids have these days. So for me, it was rather insightful, and I just want to struggle and not want to because I just feel like she's coming from this position that the whole book is going to propagate, and I don't want to get into just wanting to argue everything. I want to try to understand her reasoning and follow it. At the same time, it feels like Of course, like anybody who's going to write about a thesis that they have, they're going to pull the examples that support it, and then I'm going to try to find all the examples that I disagree with, and that's okay. So to me, the thing that I'm hopeful for is a lot of this is just this societal change that's in motion, and it's not like we're going to stop using these devices. It's not like people are going to stop walking around like this on a great scale, but what can we do by just having more of these conversations about it, and not just, it's not like we're all blindly accepting this stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, people are making choices to give these kids these robot things for various reasons, and try to get out of the mindset about this is so different than me and my teddy bear, so it's different, and I don't understand it, and there's something wrong about it. But the whole idea about the changing, like when she talked about the way the initial way they looked at the way some of this computerized with Ask Eliza went as something simple and obvious that it's not real. Sort of our relationship to the machines that she's alluding to, more in her forward. I'm kind of interested to see how that, what other things she is going to bring to that discussion, because I mean that's what's most interesting is like how are we changing as people or as groups of people as this becomes part of our lives. So we don't watch, I mean, when I think about it, I mean, for me the thing that's changed most radically is the way we were, so when I grew up, was our entertainment was so dictated by television networks and the schedule and the premieres, and that has been completely undermined by on-demand and stuff. And it's a small part of our lives, but it's radically changed something that we do with a lot of our time. And the way we as a society change along with that maybe doesn't go as fast as some of those changes in the technology.
Yeah.
Period. That was a comma, semicolon.
No, that's you kind of wrapped it up all nicely, and I mean, and Sherry even mentioned that. I don't remember if it was in chapter 1 or if it was in the intro. She talked about she's working with moving targets, like literally moving. There's an update to an app, or a brand new app comes out, and within a matter of days or weeks, instantly, kids are now creating 6-second videos with Vine, or doing all sorts of strange, unique, interesting things with Snapchat, and the ways in which we communicate or are able to communicate just can change overnight. Cool. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, guys.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Greatly appreciate it.
First book club. Wow.
Yeah! Way to go, Alan. All right. High five to you right there.
I wouldn't have read anything. I like the schedule, because it's I have like 5 books that are open that are half read for like 2 months.
Yes.
It sounds like you do the same thing I do. I'm like trying to figure out which chapter am I in which book right now.
Oh gosh. Yep.
It's my problem that I have with continuous partial attention.
Sorry, I didn't hear that, Ron. I was tweeting.
Yeah,
sorry.
Right. Cool. All right. Well, next week, chapters 3, 4, and 5. Is that what I put down there?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That should be good. That should be easy to do. That should be manageable. Cool. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will go ahead and end the broadcast. So everybody that's watching, thanks for watching. Bye.